All right, we're introducing the concept of perfectly competitive markets via diagram today, what it looks like, and sort of how they end up with, I guess, what we would call a perfectly elastic demand curve. First thing to remember, the optimal quantity that every firm will purchase or will derive their quantity at is where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. That's what they care about. Right, and so we're going to have to go away from a traditional supply and demand diagram pretty soon, where essentially we're looking at the marginal cost curve as a supply curve. And where it reaches marginal revenue, that's where quantity will be set by a specific firm. In a perfectly competitive market, a few things to keep in mind. They are price takers. I'll explain what that is in just a second. Their products are homogeneous, they're standardized, essentially they are the same, and there's free entry and free exit. Right, so one helpful way to think is whatever this market is, for a perfectly competitive market, we'll start with a supply and demand diagram. Okay, so demand zero, supply zero, creates a price that's zero. But because perfectly competitive markets, okay, all the products are the same, they are what are called price takers. They're such a small part of the overall industry, each individual firm, that they can't do anything to the actual market price. They could sell a ton, they could sell zero, market price isn't going to change. What that means is, if you come across here, that creates a perfectly elastic demand curve at the price. So notice P naught, P naught. Perfectly elastic demand curve, well, that also then means that marginal revenue equals price. That's the demand curve. It's also average revenue. And so average revenue is revenue over quantity. In this case, it's the same as marginal revenue, and it's the same as price because it's the same all through here. No matter what, that's the price. Now what you've got to add, okay, and we're going to ignore the orange for a second. You have a marginal cost curve, you have an average cost curve, okay, and I've circled in orange here, okay, where average cost is at its minimum. Okay. That by itself doesn't make any difference. It's going to be something that we move towards, but right now that doesn't make any difference. What makes a difference is where marginal cost equals marginal revenue. And where that happens, where these two meet, where marginal cost equals marginal revenue, is where quantity is set. Now here's what's interesting. At this price and this quantity, this particular firm, okay, or firms in this industry would be making what are called abnormal profits. Profits above zero from an economic perspective. Price is here, their average cost at that quantity is right here. This is going to send a lot of signals, okay, to people in other industries, to people who might want to think about joining the industry, and because there's free entry and free exit in a perfectly competitive market, that will cause the supply curve to shift out. That's going to draw price down, okay, just traditional supply and demand diagram. Now watch what happens. It's going to draw it down, okay, theoretically, until just the point where, now we've done it this way specifically, until just the point where marginal cost equals average cost. That's average cost, lowest point, we're productively efficient. It's also going to equal marginal revenue because marginal revenue is there. So perfectly competitive markets create a situation where price equals average cost. Okay, so there's no economic profits. That means there's economic profits of zero. You're covering your opportunity cost, and we're productively efficient. If price were to fall below, okay, average cost, there would be firms that would leave the industry, that would raise price up until this point. Because there's free entry and free exit, we always, in a perfectly competitive market, end up right here. Okay? We end up productively efficient at the lowest point of average cost, where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. That is our introduction for perfectly competitive markets. Always remember, keep your opportunity costs high and your expectations low.